Welcome to the Rescue, Rebuild, Restore podcast, where we equip church leaders and compassionate Christians to serve the hurting with spirit-led wisdom. I'm your host, Suzanne Burns, author of the book, Rescue, Rebuild, Restore, Compassion That Works. Together, we're going to explore how to rescue body and soul, rebuild spirit and will, and restore lives through the Holy Spirit's power. Because every person deserves to be seen, healed, and loved. Let's dive into today's episode and discover how to live out this calling. Hi, and welcome back to another episode of the Rescue, Rebuild, Restore podcast. I'm your host, Suzanne Burns. I'm very glad you're with me today. So today I wanted to talk about forgiveness versus reconciliation, healing without forcing fixes. So one of the biggest challenges for a lot of compassionate Christians is how to heal the broken relationships around the traumatic situation, right? So think of like an addict who is now in recovery, who wants to reconcile with their family, with their parents, their cousins, their aunts, their uncles, their children, sometimes their grown children. That can be really intimidating, but also it can be really unhealthy. And so today, that's one of the things I wanted to talk about. The goal today is to clarify what forgiveness and reconciliation really mean, and then to offer some solutions on a path towards healing with boundaries rooted in faith and trauma awareness, because that's really all that we do around here, right? But really to help understand how all of this fits together from a biblical perspective, but also from a trauma-informed relational approach that is going to bring about true and lasting healing throughout the family, throughout the scattered relationships that all too often have been damaged by the very person who is trying to come back and make amends. And it can be really difficult to allow them back in yet again, and to risk being hurt, to risk being taken advantage of again, to risk loving them and then them going back into active addiction and breaking your heart all over again, right? All of that is painful, and all of that is a fear that most family members have when someone in recovery comes back into their lives. For example, I have a nephew. Well, he's actually the ex-husband of my niece. And so I think of him as a nephew. They were together for a very long time, but technically he actually isn't kin to us whatsoever. He does pop in now and again to our church where he feels safe and grounded when he's on the upswing of healing. And then periodically he will head back down into the downswing of addiction or of hard times. Sometimes he's going in and out of rehab programs. Sometimes he's in active addiction, and every now and again he kind of comes up for air and comes back to church for one or two services and then disappears again, all over again. In the early days of his recovery, I was a lot more invested in trying to help him get to safe places, get to safe ministries, get the help that he needed. It's now been a lot of years at this point. He's been in jail. He's been in various recovery programs over all of this time. And bless his heart, I don't know him well enough. I'm not in his life unless he comes into the church. So, when he does come back in to the church, there's oftentimes a sense that, oh, here he is coming back again. Oh, he's just gonna ask for money, or he's just gonna do this. He's actually never asked me for money whatsoever. But there is that sense from other people that he is just doing this for manipulation and is going to turn back around and go right back into active addiction almost right off the bat. And unfortunately, that's fairly accurate, because that is his model. That is exactly what he's been doing now for a number of years. Bless his heart. Then I have all of these clients that I work with in the ministry, in the maternity home, that are in the exact same place, but they are living with me post rehab. They're actually in my restoration program, where I don't know what he's learning and where he's at. And like I say, I don't know him well. I'm not actually kin to him. I've just known him for a long time on the outskirts of his addiction, and he knows that I'm a safe person. He never asked me for any money or anything like that. And I don't want to make this episode all about him. I'm trying to make the episode about the contrast between where people are in their recovery when they come back into that family unit. So now let's talk about my girls. They end up in detox. They come to us sometimes from Department of Children's Services and they say, look, the mom gave birth to this child. Both were addicted to meth. Baby is now removed from her custody. This is a literal story that we're in the process of walking out right now. It's not the first one or the only one, but this is actually going on right now. He's been on a drip in the NICU to weaning him off the addiction, and mom is in a rehab program, a 30-day program, and custody has already been removed. So he will be going to a foster home while she gets the help that she needs, and then she can, of course, seek reunification when she's ready. So that's literally our ministry. So she is now in our program and getting supervised visits that we provide. We film them, we follow every protocol. And all too often what happens is these moms that we work with reach this place where it's like, I'm better, I'm healed, or I'm healing, I'm moving forward, and now I want to go back and see my mom, or I'll apologize to my daddy, or I'll make things right with my family of origin. And so in that, they're seeking reconciliation, but what has to happen first is forgiveness. And too often, the families are not ready to forgive. They're not interested in reconciliation until you've proven that this is going to last, until you've demonstrated that this is going to not repeat, right? So I wouldn't in a million years bring my nephew over to my home because I'm not going to open myself up to that. The risk of him stealing things or coming over while he's high or dropping in sometime in the future when he needs me. I'm not going to open myself up to that. However, I am going to care for him, care about him when we're standing together at church. I'll stand out in the parking lot, I'll talk with him, I'll give him recommendations, I'll encourage him, I'll pray with him, but I don't give money and I don't invite him over to my home. My husband would have a fit if I did, but that's irrelevant. He is not ready for reconciliation because he hasn't demonstrated that he's worthy of it. But I want you to understand what I mean by that. I don't mean that he's worth reconciling with. God has already ordained that that is so. He is a creature of God, worthy of reconciliation, but he hasn't earned the right to be reconciled with his family at this point. I want to be really, really careful on that. I'm not making a spiritual judgment. I'm making a soul-based judgment, the mind, will, and emotions. Until we reach a point where we're ready for true and lasting stability, for true and lasting healing, we're not ready to be reconciled. We are still at risk for falling back into those old patterns. When I see it with our clients, my girls, oftentimes the drug addiction took a toll on that family. She was lying. She was stealing money from grandma or stealing pills from grandma or so many different things. She's been in and out of jail. There's a laundry list. All too often, there's a laundry list of grievances that these families have against my girls. And so one of the first things that we have to talk about when she sees she's ready to reconcile with her family, we have to talk about the reality of her asking for forgiveness first. In order for them to be reconciled together, she has to acknowledge what she did as part of this family dynamic. And then after that, whether they accept it, whether they forgive her, all of that is on them. That's their decision. They don't have to choose forgiveness. They don't have to do anything because they're not always Christians themselves. They get to make their own decisions. But then after that, regardless of how they choose to respond to you, you still have to prove yourself faithful. You still have to prove yourself better, healed, that this time is different. Many times our girls have been in and out of other rehab programs before. So just the fact that she's in our program, just because she's detoxed, just because she's done this and she's doing well now, that doesn't necessarily indicate to the family that this is the time that she's going to be better, because they've seen it before. And so that's what we end up having to talk about with our clients, that reconciliation cannot occur until everyone in the group is ready to be reconciled. And so you bear the burden of that because you were the instigator of it. And really and truly, that is so hard for many of my moms to acknowledge. Well, because my mom did this, or my stepdad that did this. And it's like, okay, but did they put their fist through the wall? Did they force you to put the needle in your arm and to start a multi-year meth addiction or heroin addiction? Did they force you to steal cars and to steal money? And did they force you to do those things? Or are those things that you, when she's ready to recognize her own role in all of this, that's where reconciliation can begin. But it always has to first come from forgiveness. And so let's talk for a minute about forgiveness and reconciliation and really what those words mean and then how that gets lived out in our client. So first of all, forgiveness is, think about Ephesians 4:32, forgive as Christ forgave. This is a heart posture of releasing bitterness, of releasing enmity, of anger, and to choose to let go of the resentment, to choose to let go of the holding it over someone. I can ask you to forgive me, but I can't force you to forgive me, right? I can ask for forgiveness, but I don't have any control over whether or not you will actually do the act of forgiving, right? We can say, oh, I forgive you, I forgive you, I forgive you. We can say that all day long, but is it, I forgive you, but I don't want to ever see that again? Or I forgive you until I see you acting the same way. I forgive you if you will do this. Our clients don't have any control over the other half of that conversation, right? They can only forgive in their own hearts the things that were done to them and forgive themselves, which is like way, way harder. And then they can ask for forgiveness in the people that they have harmed, but they don't have any control over whether or not those people actually forgive them, even in what they say versus what they do. So you can say, oh, I forgive you, honey, I forgive you, and I'm so glad you're doing better. But that doesn't necessarily mean you were forgiven. It merely means that those words were. Forgiveness has to be demonstrated, just like healing and sobriety have to be demonstrated over time for you to begin to trust it. So what is reconciliation? This is restoring a relationship which requires mutual safety, trust, and evident change. And that's really what takes so long, right? It's conditional a lot of times, it's two-way, and it's not always possible. So sometimes reconciliation with a friend or a family member can happen as you rebuild trust, as you rebuild connection. But sometimes you don't have any control over that reconciliation, the other half of that reconciliation, because they don't trust you. They don't believe that this is real or that this is going to last. They're just waiting for the other shoe to drop, proverbially speaking. Sometimes this can be really hurtful for our clients because they want to reconcile. Like, why won't you trust me? I'm so much better. I'm so much more healed. I'm doing all of these great things in this program that I'm part of. Where the family is saying, yeah, but I've seen you do that before and it didn't last. Or I've seen you make promises before and you broke them. I need to see that this is real. And that can only take time, right? Only time can prove out someone's actions. Only time can prove out a changed life. Words cannot do it. Words are a good start, but the evidence is in the actions. And so in all reality, one of the things that we fight against the most is our clients' frustration and hurt and disappointment in the reality that the family is simply not ready to believe what she said, because she had said things in the past that were proven to be not true. I'm going to love you forever, or I'm never going to do drugs again, or I'm never going to do that action again, and then turn around and do it. So clearly you're proving that you're a liar, right? So now you're telling me those same things again, and I want to believe you, but I've believed you in the past and you lied to me. So now my expectation is that old kind of trust but verify. So I'm waiting for you to verify what you've said. I'm waiting for you to prove that you're not going to fall back into addiction. I'm waiting for you to prove that you're not going to steal from me again. I'm waiting for you to prove that things have actually changed. And when that family unit that's saying that is moderately healthy, then this can be walked through together over a period of time. Could be months, could be a couple of years, but you're slowly rebuilding that relationship over time into a healthy pathway. When that family of origin relationship is not healthy, which is far more common, at least in my clients. Now we're talking about something way, way different. Now it's, well, dad's an alcoholic, mom is paranoid, schizophrenic, mom is a drug user herself. It's not even dad, it's like stepdad number 14. And mom is just in relationship after relationship after relationship. The only difference is that mom hasn't been arrested. Mom has the stable house, or mom has custody of her daughter's children, or something like that. There's actually not a lot of difference from one generation to the next. And so this is where reconciliation gets a lot more murky, or forgiveness gets a lot more challenging, because it truly does have to go both ways. When I'm coming to you to ask for forgiveness for the thefts, for the drug addiction, for putting you through this, for obligating you to raise my children because I haven't been doing this. But also I know in my heart that you need to be asking me for my forgiveness for bringing men in and out of my life, for allowing me to be harmed by those men, for home instability, for food, for relationship insecurity, where, maybe the mother, which in my case would now be a grandmother, was affecting how was raised, right? It requires forgiveness on both sides in order to bring about true and lasting reconciliation. The girl in my program is getting the trauma-informed training, the teaching that she needs. She's beginning to learn how to unpack some of this, how to walk in forgiveness, how to forgive herself, how to understand how the trauma she experienced reshaped her brain development, and all those kinds of things, right? Her family is not getting that teaching. Her family is not learning new coping skills, healthy means of communication. Her family is still what it was. And now she is the one who is different and is coming back into the family that is exactly the same. So that becomes a source of frustration, a source of disappointment. And then when you add in forgiveness and the desire for reconciliation into that mix, because everyone wants to reconcile with their families. It's still their mama, it's still their daddy, it's still their family. They always want to be reconciled back to that family of origin. Even if that doesn't mean like living there or, being closely connected. Maybe there needs to be boundaries still, but nevertheless, there is always that sense that I want to reconcile back with my family of origin. So when it's an unhealthy family of origin, and it continues to be an unhealthy family of origin, and she is becoming more healed, more stable, more trustworthy, that she's not going to fall back into old patterns of addiction. The families, a lot of times, not only do they not trust it because they've seen it before, they've seen the promises broken before, but also you start showing a light on their reality, and it doesn't always look pretty. So when you start asking for forgiveness, and then you also start saying, and I kind of need forgiveness as well, that is a reminder of those circumstances, right? That the family of origin has kind of pushed off. Right? It's very easy to say, well, you're the problem because you're the one in addiction. it's very difficult for them to reflect and to say, I contributed to the pain that led you into addiction. That is really difficult for people to acknowledge. And so therefore many of them don't. So we reach where our client wants reconciliation and they're asking for forgiveness, but also they need the other person to be asking for forgiveness. They need that acknowledgement that you did wrong to me and I am in the process of learning to forgive you, but I really need you to acknowledge what you did to me and how you contributed to what I have struggled with over the years. And sometimes they're just not going to get that. So walking through all of those kind of nuances while helping them navigate the desire to reconcile is the very tenuous pathway. And until we really get to that place of reconciliation, we don't necessarily know when we're going to. All we can do is keep walking forward and keep trusting. And so one of the frustrations is that sense that I have to forgive you for what you did to me, and you don't have to even acknowledge what you did to me. But I not only have to forgive you, but then I have to ask for your forgiveness for my part in it. For our client, it can feel very unfair, right? Very unfair. When the reality is they don't know what you know, and so we can't hold them accountable to that. You know the truth, and you are the one who has been getting the support and the training and the encouragement and the healing, and they have not. So let's look at them with a little more empathy, with a little more compassion, and with a little more recognition of their pain, of their hurt, of the things that contributed to make them who they are now. So how do we forgive without forcing some kind of reconciliation? Because sometimes they're just not ready, whether your client's not ready or the family of origin is not ready. How can we begin to walk through a place of healing for our client, who is always our main priority? So some of the barriers to reconciliation and forgiveness as well would be guilt. Am I unforgiving if I don't reconcile? Am I forgiving if I don't want to be over there? Like, you might be able to reconcile and talk on the phone, but I don't want to come to your house, or I don't want my children to know their grandmother because of what you did, or because of your attitude towards me, because of the things that you say. I can reconcile and I can still love you and I cannot hold bitterness, but I can't allow my children to be affected by you any longer. It could be pressure, because I have to forgive so that I don't go to hell. I have to forgive because that's what God says I have to do. Whether or not I actually feel forgiveness towards you, whether I actually want to forgive you, whether I'm actually at that point or not, I have to at least say the words, right? Or sometimes just the pain of releasing that anger. Like, if I say that I forgive them, then it's as if they've won. It's as if all of that was okay, all of the things they did to me. So when our client has to forgive, we can walk through some of these conversations. When our client has to ask for forgiveness from other people, we don't necessarily get the luxury of being able to help the other party receive that healing and be able to come to a place of forgiveness. So sometimes our client recognizes that, right? Our client asks for forgiveness, but they know they've not been actually forgiven, because they now know what forgiveness looks like and what it should look like, and their family of origin is not doing that, right? Maybe they're holding grudges, maybe they're still walking in the expectation that, well, you're just going to fail again, or you're just going to fall back in addiction again soon anyways. We had a client one time whose parents had custody of her son, and they had a 5-gallon bucket on the front porch. So every time she came over to visit her son, they made her pee in that bucket on the front porch and then do a drug test right there in front of God and everybody before they would allow her into the house. So that is a really good picture of forgiveness in words, but not forgiveness in action. That was really hard for her to know that her mom and dad are holding her to this kind of standard, which was really unfair, because because she was in our program. And so we knew that she was already doing random drug tests, but they had to see it for themselves. And so that's yet another piece of evidence of this family had been burned so many times by her that this was their solution to be able to, in good faith, allow her to see her son in their home. And, this is what she had to do in order to prove that she was ready to be reconciled. So what are some steps? So first of all, we want to help our clients process that pain, whether it's journaling, whether it's through prayer, whether it's talking with a counselor, whatever it is, we've got to get that pain out of them. There's not as much that we can do for the family of origin unless they allow it, but at least we can be working with our client on helping them release the pain and the hurt and the frustration. Forgiveness is a choice. Forgiveness is an action. It's a verb. We have to do forgiveness, just like we have to do trust. We have to do love. It's not a feeling, it's a lived experience. We have to demonstrate that we're forgiving. There's words, but then there's action behind the words that prove whether or not those words were true and valid. And so deciding to release those resentments, regardless of whether or not the feelings linger, regardless of whether or not the hurt or the pain is still there, you can release the resentment. You can release the bitterness. You can release the hold that it has over your life and allow that to be healed by the Lord. And then we also need to recognize that in order for reconciliation to occur, we have to have safety in place. So assessing the safety of this reconciliation. And that could be physical safety, but usually it's more emotional safety, making sure that this is a safe relationship. I can be reconciled to you, but not if you're going to go tell my business to every single person you come across. Not if I'm going to get calls from my sister about things that I said to you in confidence. That's not safe. So reconciliation needs repentance, but it also needs safety. And so recognizing whether or not that safety exists in this relationship and setting a boundary around your safety. So even if this relationship is not safe, I can still be part of it within these fixed boundaries. So for example, that might be, we can talk on the phone, but I'm not going to come over. Or we can talk on the phone, but I'm not going to see you in person, or I'm not going to allow my children to be around you yet. So things that we can choose to do that demonstrate that I am willing to reconcile to this point and no further. This is the boundary that I have established. And if you'll prove to me that you can be trustworthy, then that boundary maybe can shift. But until then, this is the hard and fast rule. So that leads it then into setting boundaries. So communicating those limits in love. I love you, but I can't see you unless you're sober. I won't bring my children over unless you're sober. Those kinds of things. It's very difficult to be both asking for forgiveness from the very same person that you're having to do forgiveness towards. It's very difficult, and it can get very blurry. It can get very muddy, but nevertheless, that is the majority of our clients' lived experiences. And so really and truly, that forgiveness and reconciliation ultimately create a ripple effect throughout the family unit. If at any point my little nephew stays clean and stays stable, then he would be able to come back and to reconcile with his child, with the people in his life that he loves and who love him. He would be able to be involved in the ministry at church, where now he comes like twice a year, unless he's in jail. I think I've seen him probably in the last 3 years. I've seen him maybe 5 times for a church service or Wednesday night. And a lot of times he doesn't even approach me. He's just, on a different side of the church, and then he leaves very quickly. So some of those 5 or 6 times that I've seen him over the last 3 years, I haven't even been able to have a conversation with him. So all of that is hard, right? Because I do care for him. He was part of our life for a very long time, but he has to be ready to make the true and lasting changes before he can begin asking for or receiving forgiveness from the family. And then after that would come the slow process of reconciliation reconciliation, of being able to be in the family on a regular and consistent basis. That's really, really hard for people to accept, especially when they're so eager for reconciliation. They're so eager for custody to be restored of their children. They're so eager to have all of this behind them, right? To be fully moved forward. The reality is that you haven't been stable long enough for people to believe it. And until people can believe it, then they can't trust in it. And if they can't trust in it, then there's no safety for them. So for your client, right, to be able to demonstrate trustworthiness to your family of origin, you have to maintain your sobriety. You have to maintain your stability long enough for them to believe it. And that's going to look different for every person, right? Some people, you would only need to be stable for a few months. Other people, it's going to be 2 years. Other people, they're not really going to believe you until 5-6 years from now. And sometimes even that far down, they're still going to occasionally make the random comment like, as long as you don't go back to those old ways, or as long as you don't fall back into those old patterns, or as long as you don't, go back into addiction, which is evidence that they still, even 5, 6, 10 years later, they're still watching and waiting for that other shoe to drop, and still waiting for you to prove to them your untrustworthiness. And unfortunately, that's just the reality of it. They get to decide what they will accept as trustworthy. You get to set boundaries for yourself. They get to set boundaries for themselves. So when you're working with clients, it's such a multifaceted, multi-nuanced picture, right? You have the control over what you do and what you say, and you can reach out asking for forgiveness. You can reach out offering forgiveness, but there's really nothing that you can do that will force them to accept forgiveness from you. So one last thing that I want to leave you with is that forgiveness is very freeing, right? Asking for and receiving forgiveness, offering forgiveness to someone else, that's incredibly freeing. Reconciliation, on the other hand, requires a place of safety. It's going to wait until safety is in position before reconciliation can really come into being. Too often, people equate forgiveness and reconciliation as the same thing, but it isn't at all. And many times that's one reason why people say, well, I can't forgive this person for what they did to me because I never want to see them again. Well, again, forgiveness is one thing, but reconciliation is different. You do not have to be reconciled to someone who caused you great and lasting harm, but is not looking for forgiveness, is not asking for forgiveness themselves. You can still forgive them and get that healing in your heart without having to reconcile to them. That's two completely different things. Then on the flip side, the reconciliation that you or that your client wants to find with their family of origin, it's that same thing. You can forgive, you can ask for forgiveness, but reconciliation requires a place of safety in order for it to occur. So if you want to reconcile, or if this is what your client is saying, then the burden is on them to provide that safety, provide the stability. And safety can really only come from consistency, from repetition, from demonstrating that I am a safe place, from demonstrating that I am not going to go back into those old patterns all over again. Like I said just a moment ago, that takes time. It takes time to prove it out. And again, the person on the receiving end is the decider of how long that time needs to take, right? Whether it's 6 months, 2 years, a decade, whatever, before they will allow reconciliation to come about. We only have control over ourselves, and that's barely, right? Sometimes barely. We certainly don't have any control over other people and their decisions. So I don't want that to harden people's hearts or to cause them to feel like, oh, well, this is not ever going to work, or my mom's not ever going to forgive me, or none of that is true necessarily. The Lord can do all sorts of amazing things, and I have seen it. I have seen evidence where families have said, she will never be allowed back in my house, or she will never never have custody restored. I will never trust her again. I will never. And then eventually they are doing those exact things that they swore they would never allow to happen. But it's because of faithfulness, it's because of patience, and ultimately it's because of the provision of the Lord. It's because of the grace that the Lord offers. And as we walk in his healing, then he begins to heal in a ripple effect throughout the whole family unit. And that was what I started to say about my little nephew, is the ripple effect that restoration with him could take throughout the family. And I would love to see that day happen for him and for his son, and really for all of the family that cares for him. But that's up to him. So anyway, I hope this podcast was encouraging. I hope this helps. And I look forward to hearing your comments and your thoughts and your opinions. Remember to like, share, subscribe, share this with friends, with your pastor, with your youth minister, with whoever in your life needs to hear it, needs to be reminded of it. And I appreciate you helping me get the message out. Thanks for watching the Rescue, Rebuild, Restore podcast. Thank you for joining me on the Rescue, Rebuild, Restore podcast. I pray this episode has equipped you to serve with greater clarity and compassion. If you're ready to go deeper, grab a copy of Rescue, Rebuild, Restore, Compassion That Works on either Amazon or at rescuerebuildrestore.com. And while you're there, you can also join our Rescue, Rebuild, Restore Compassion Collective.